Joining me now is Congresswoman Karen Bass, a Democrat from California and second vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Representative, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Sure.
President Trump is already arguing that Democrats will take the blame if there is a government shutdown over immigration. What's your response to that?
Well, frankly, you know, the Republicans control the House, and they certainly have more than enough votes. So if they want to pass something, they do not need our votes. If the government shuts down, it is the responsibility of the Republicans. Yeah.
Also, I want to ask you about the Washington Post has new reporting on that intense meeting about immigration that happened last Thursday. Maybe you've heard about it. It's been in the news. Now, this is according to the Washington Post. It says Trump was curt and dismissive, saying he was not making immigration policy to cater to the CBC and did not particularly care about that bloc's demands, according to people briefed on the meeting. Now, I know you feel very strongly about this. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's any surprise at all. You know, we did go meet with the president several months ago, and we took the time to prepare a 125-page book of policies and issues that are significant to the African-American population, and we didn't hear one word from him. We took the meeting seriously. He didn't, so it's no surprise. I think, if anything, he has shown that he is consistent. His attitude toward African Americans have been consistent for the last several decades, so no surprise there. Yeah. I do think, though, that he doesn't understand the significance of the Congressional Black Caucus. He doesn't realize that CBC members lead many of the key committees, like Homeland Security, Financial Services, etc. So he can dismiss us, but he can't ignore us.
Representative Bass, President Trump said today that he wants people to immigrate from everywhere. How do you square that with what he said last week?
Well, I think what he said last week is what he feels. He showed his ignorance when he talked about people from Africa coming and not bringing or contributing anything to this country. He obviously does not understand that African immigrants have some of the highest levels of education. And so it's not a surprise to me what he had to say. I don't believe what he says today at all. He has done nothing but tried to curtail immigration from certain countries, and he made it clear where he wants immigrants to come from.
Here is Senator Cory Booker addressing DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen's claim that she couldn't recall exactly what President Trump said. Watch this.
When ignorance and bigotry is allied with power, it is a dangerous force in our country. Your silence and your amnesia is complicity. I hurt. When Dick Durbin called me, I had tears of rage when I heard about his experience in that meeting. And for you not to feel that hurt and that pain, and to dismiss some of the questions of my colleagues, saying I've already answered that line of questions, when tens of millions of Americans are hurting right now because of what they're worried about what happened in the White House. That's unacceptable to me. There are threats in this country. People plotting. I receive enough death threats to know the reality. Kamala receives enough death threats to know the reality. Mazie receives enough death threats to know the reality. And I've got a president of the United States whose office I respect, who talks about the countries of origins of my fellow citizens in the most despicable of manner. You don't remember. You can't remember the words of your commander-in-chief. I find that unacceptable. Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful to be on this committee. I'm more than ever today happy I am here. Thank you.
Representative Bass, Senator Booker was angry. You could see the Secretary's reaction. She rolled her eyes. Did that just add insult to injury?
Well, absolutely it does. And, you know, the fact that she is, in my opinion, outright lying, as well as the other senators there who first of all said they didn't remember and then said absolutely they didn't hear that. So I think it's pathetic that people with such authority would lie. But if you think about it, you know, one of the fundamental problems of our country has been we have never been able to come to grips with racism. And so if those comments weren't racist, then I really don't know how those individuals would define what racism is. And then under the far out chance that they don't remember, then it just shows how a racist comment doesn't even register with them, which might mean that they hear that kind of language all the time. Yeah. So I just think that it is another example of what we have seen from this White House since day one.
You said outright lying. This may be another indication that there are people in Washington in the administration now that have trouble with the truth, because I want to talk about the unemployment rate for African Americans. It fell to 6.8% in December, and the president is crowing about it. Here's what the president had to say earlier today.
Black unemployment is the best it's ever been in recorded history. It's been fantastic, and it's the best number we've had with respect to black unemployment. We've never seen anything even close, so we're very honored by that.
I have to tell you a statistic that just came out recently, as you saw, that the black unemployment rate, the African-American unemployment rate, is the lowest it's ever been in the history of the report. So we're very honored by that. It's really a great thing.
A couple of things he's not saying there. The unemployment rate from President Obama fell from, I think it was 16, somewhere 16.9 or somewhere there, to the sevens during his tenure. But does President Trump deserve the credit?
Oh, he absolutely doesn't deserve the credit. And I think what is important is that the black unemployment rate is still double that of the white unemployment rate. So it's not like we've solved a problem here. And I think when you have a pathological liar, either that or he's delusional, either one is bad for the President of the United States. When you have somebody who lies repeatedly, multiple times a day, it should not be a surprise that members of his cabinet would follow that behavior. And sadly to say, it's not a surprise that his supporters, be they in the Senate or in the House, would think that it is perfectly okay to just outright lie. And that's exactly what we're seeing.
Well, let me give these are the facts because they're important now, and people, you know, have been dismissing them lately. Unemployment for blacks is still far higher, as you said, than other groups. White unemployment is at 3.7%. Asian unemployment is 2.5%. Hispanic unemployment or joblessness, 4.9%. You can see African American 6.8% there. And it still trails whites. And median weekly earnings for African Americans last fall were $696 compared with $887 for whites and $1,010 for Asian Americans. Clearly, there's a lot of work left.
Well, absolutely, there's a lot of work. But, you know, implied in what he said is that we ought to be happy. I mean, you remember during the campaign, he said, you know, what do you have to lose? Your communities are a wreck. It's the same line of thinking. It's the same tone. It's the same way he addresses the African-American community. And what I have to say is that it's been consistent for decades. This is not new behavior. These are not new comments. What I think is far more important, though, forget his words. It's his policies. It's what's happening in the Department of Justice. It's the way he's rolling back civil rights gangs. It's the way he, you know, relaxed the consent decrees, voting rights, you know, the way he had his voting suppression commission. What he is doing policy-wise, systematically, is far more dangerous than his lies.
Yeah, and just for that, when you talked about that, he said that his approval ratings with black Americans has doubled.
Doubled from what, 1 to 2?
Well, that was false, because 15% of black Americans said that they approved of his performance following his inauguration, and then 1 year later, our latest CNN poll shows that only 3% of black Americans approve of the president. That's a 91% disapproval as well. So there you go. Representative, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.